everyone. Welcome to After Sex Ed with Sabrina. I have B here, and I'm very excited because B is in my class. We are both studying sexual health at the graduate level, and B is in my class, and B is brilliant. And I think I said that in one of your posts. Like every time you post, I get so excited to see what you're going to write next. And that's how our class is delivered, is that we can see each other's work. Like we can see each other's answers. There's discussion boards and there's a topic like polyamory. And then every student weighs in. And I am not the only one that says that about B, because I've seen other people comment on your answers going, I was waiting for you. And like, there you go yet again, seeing things in a different way that I like so appreciate. And I just really like you so much, and I'm so glad you could do this. So welcome. And do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is B, and my pronouns are they, them, and I currently work in kind of the realm of queer education and also psychology education, but trying to branch out and kind of intersect some of those interests to bring it more into the focus of sexual health as well.
Aren't we all? Like everyone in the program is like, I'm cool where I'm at, but like the more you talk about sex, the more it just like broadens and broadens and broadens. You're like, I have a lot of things I want to explore, and I want a lot of people to know it, which I don't know if like that's why a big part of that's why I started the podcast was like learning things in this program. And I was like, it's crazy that people don't know this and that people should know, right? So before we get into our topic, which is polyamory, and you're gonna Bia said that they are an open book, and I'm gonna I'm gonna go in there. I want to ask you how you learned about sex, and I ask everyone that.
Yeah, totally. I learned about sex. It would have been the summer between grade 6 and grade 7 was when we did like the talk with my
Ooh.
mom.
Ooh.
But the talk was we like got to choose a hotel, and so we like stayed for a night at a hotel with my mom and listened to literal cassette tapes from Focus on the Family to have like the Christian perspective. And
Ah.
so, because Focus on the Family, I don't know if other folks know, it's very purity culture, very like
Mm.
religious. I don't remember a whole lot from it other than just I remember one thing sticking out to me was the only virgin birth, like the only person to have not had sex was the Virgin Mary.
Right.
And so this kind of a thing. But before that, I had never heard of the concept. Like, had never occurred to me. Hadn't heard whispers on the playground.
About
Um,
sex at all?
nothing.
Sorry,
Nothing.
I have to control my face. I'm like, oh,
No, I
okay.
know it was wild. And I read when I was in grade 6. I read the book Memoirs of a Geisha, which is all about
Ah.
geishas and like the selling of virginity. I had no idea what virginity was. I had no
Oh,
idea what sex was. When people would ask, or like there would be that kind of those conversations around like, oh, like, well, where do babies come from, like that kind of a thing. I
yeah.
was like, why is this a hard question to answer? They come from inside the mommy. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know why people, but like I had no concept before that.
I know what you mean about like they come from the mom. And I think in my mind, because I was brought up in I went to Catholic school. I don't even think I was brought up in like a restrictive household. Just we didn't talk about anything. That like I knew that babies grew in the mommies, but like I think I just thought like Jesus put them there. I don't know, like God did it, and that what's so complicated, And then like then you learned about it. We learned about intercourse, penis, vagina, and I was like, that can't be. Is that it? Like,
Well,
hold
and at
on.
that point too in my life, I had never seen a penis before. Like no diagrams, nothing. Like
Oh.
I had two sisters, and so like just had never I was like, whoa, other people have other parts. Wow.
So do you mean like okay, this is grade 6 going into grade 7, you said? Because
Hmm.
oh, you know what? No. I had seen penises like changing the kids I babysat their diapers. Like, and I think maybe drawings. And when you what was the name of the program that you were talking about?
That one was Focus on the Family. It's like
Okay.
a big company, very religious company.
In Ontario, we had Fully Alive. That I remember. And it was like sex? Sure. But I mean, it's not bad that it was mostly like relationships. Like they talked about like, which is fine, but that it was just really heavy into purity culture, and that like, stay clean for God, and that, every time you have sex with somebody, I recall, you lose a part of your soul. And then eventually you've got no soul to give. And then, you're like, oh my God, everybody, they're just walking around like zombies. That's what they are. Like it's heartbreaking. That's for another day. But thank you for sharing that, because it's so diverse. I ask everybody that comes on, and some people have these really like watershed moments where they're like, oh, I saw a music video, or I saw two girls kissing, and I was like, oh, that's me. That's what I want, like. And then some people are like, have these. I interviewed somebody who said they learned about sex when they got married. Like, it was just a mystery. God, anyways. But our topic is polyamory. And you are polyamorous. And before we even get into what that means, I even want to ask you when you learned about monogamy. And like, it was probably going to be around the same time, it sounds like. But yeah, when did you learn about that? Or when did you realize, why don't we start there? When did you learn about monogamy?
I think monogamy is one of those things that it is so part of the culture that there wasn't really a moment in which I learned about it, because everybody in my life was monogamous.
Yeah.
Like, I saw my parents, like, they certainly weren't dating other people. There was
Yeah.
nobody in my life that had a network. Um, but I guess, like, the moment when I learned about non monogamy and, like, that
Yeah.
this wasn't the only option, was probably only maybe 5 years ago or so.
Okay.
Um, and I just happened to see somebody on Instagram through, the classic like scrolling and clicking on different accounts, like that kind of a thing. And I
Mhm.
happened to see this person where I was like, oh, like, she's pretty, she has cool pictures, whatever, kind of was like scrolling
Mm.
through her feed and realized that she had two partners. And I was
Wow.
like, oh, whoa. And it was like an immediate recognition that I was like, this is me.
Wow. Like, I don't know when I learned about monogamy either, and I don't know that I've ever given it any real. That's not true. I have thought about it. When did I learn about polyamory? Like, I'd say in the last couple of years, in the same way that it's like it was a buzzword, it was going around, and that. But my position on it, like what I thought immediately was like swingers, group sex. Like that's what I thought. And it's not even that I thought that was a bad thing. I just didn't think it was what it is. Like, and I guess I almost want to dive into that like just to give like the listeners like more context in our program. We are responsible for building a course and delivering it, kind of like we had a group project basically to do that. And my group did one on abortion and abortion rights in Canada and the background behind it. But B's group did polyamory, and was it adjusting to a polyamory relationship? Yes. And then as part of like I watched it. We had to, like, we watched all the groups, but I must have watched yours 10 times. It was so illuminating. And I was like, I didn't know any of this. And like the words. It's almost like I want to be like you guys, like you're the other, but like it's almost like you guys have your own language. Like I didn't know that it was what it was. Anyways, if I could just jump in.
Yeah,
there were
absolutely.
what I saw as polyamory was if it was normally explored by people that were frustrated with monogamy. And like, do you believe that that's true, and that somebody that's like frustrated with monogamy, like, should they explore it? Should that be their motivation?
That's a good question. I think that um, frustrations with monogamy, I think they're natural, partially because it basically never really works out to have all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. Like, to have only one person in your life that you expect to meet all of your needs, whether they're sexual or intimate or intellectual or, hobbies, things like that. Like, it's unrealistic, and that's why we have friends and we have family members and we have those other relationships. But where polyamory comes into it is just this recognition that there's no problem, society doesn't see any issue with having more than one friend or more than one sibling or more than one coworker. Like, there aren't limits of quantity put on those. However, there's this like social idea that you can only ever have one romantic partner, and even to an extent, there's less stigma around sexual partners, right? Like, there's a lot of the time where people are casually having sex with multiple people, or even this idea of doing like swinging, or kind of like, okay, we'll do a threesome once in a while to spice up our relationship. But this idea that a romantic relationship is meant to be a standalone, like, no no other romantic feelings. And so I think it becomes this complicated thing of where a lot of the time people will try polyamory, or they'll try opening up their relationship in some form, with this goal of fixing something that's broken. But that isn't the reality, right? Like, if you are having relationship issues with a friend, making a new friend isn't going to fix that. And so I think a lot of the time that's just where the mindset is incorrect, is just that it's a way of repairing anything. It's kind of like that same mindset of, couples who have kids to try to save their relationship. Like, everybody knows it doesn't work. So there's a lot of stuff that has to be done beforehand, to get to a place where it's healthy enough to kind of have that open relationship, or to like explore other options.
So what kinds of things would you have to do beforehand to explore? Let's say you're in a relationship, lots of people are, that and they want to explore polyamory. What kinds of questions would you have to ask yourself, and what kinds of questions would you have to ask your partner if you wanted to explore polyamory?
I think that it looks different for different people. For me, one of the first things was just bringing up the idea in general. So I guess for like a little bit of history on my actual relationships.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a very religious, kind of conservative, religious, traditional upbringing.
Mhm.
I met who would become my husband. I met him in high school. So we started
Wow.
dating when I was 16. And we got married when I was 20. And this past September would have been, oh God, now I have to do math, would have been our, what year are we even in? Okay, would have been our sixth wedding
What
anniversary.
year is my brain in, or what year are we actually in? But
Yeah,
anyways, yeah.
seriously, right?
Ugh.
Yeah, so we have been, this February would have been kind of like 10 years of being together. But because we both came from very Christian religious upbringings, um, we very much were raised in the mindset of what's called toxic monogamy. And I'd be happy to go into that too, if you
Oh
would
yes, I
like.
want to hear about toxic monogamy.
Um, so, okay, I will tell you about toxic monogamy once
Yeah,
I'm done this
sure.
little timeline.
Sure.
So we were in a very kind of like toxic monogamous relationship, just the two of us. And as I said before, I saw this person on my Instagram probably about 5 years ago, and it was very much like a, whoa, I'm polyamorous. But I had no idea how to bring this up with my husband. And we both were very religious at the time, very, like, it just was, I was just starting to explore the fact that I was probably bisexual, let alone the whole gender question that came after. So it was very much like a big time of change. So I remember bringing it up at one point, just kind of saying, like, um, we had watched Moonlight, and I was emotional from watching the movie, and he had talked to me and he had just said, like, I know that these queer movies like have an impact on you. If you ever would want to like explore queerness, like, I would be here to support you. And I remember
Oh,
being like, whoa, that is huge. And I was
yeah.
like, yeah, like I said, I would love to try dating a woman. Like, I can't believe you would be okay with that. And he's like, oh, like, God, no, we would get divorced, but like I would support you. And I was like, oh.
What
And I
the
was
hell
like,
does
so
that
like,
mean?
it was like he would support me as a friend. He'd be like, I
Oh,
want the
okay.
best for you, but like
Yeah.
we wouldn't be together. And so I had just been like, oh, okay, so like you never could like deal with that? And he was like, no, I'd be way too jealous. I could never have you see somebody else. And so
Mm.
it was very much like, okay, we'll shut down that idea. Um, and so it would have been like January of 2020.
Yeah.
Um, Out of nowhere, he just kind of was like, okay, I think we should get a divorce. This isn't working. And I was like, whoa, what? Where did this come from? And being kind of bad, being a bad example of what I've said, I was like, okay, well, could we try seeing other people? Like, this has been what's missing in my life. And he was like, okay, well, we'll go to therapy. So, anyways, long story short, went to therapy, started seeing other people. He and I aren't together anymore.
Okay.
But or like not together romantically, I guess,
Sure.
just platonic partners. But I have other multiple partners. He is dating lots of people. So that was a long ramble, but
No,
that's
that
kind of
was an
just like the
amazing thing.
basic.
Yeah. Is he like, I know that I think you had mentioned you have 8 or 9 partners, right?
It kind of depends on a person's definition of partners, and
That's
quite
what I was
honestly,
going to
it
ask.
fluctuates a lot.
Yeah.
So what people would probably see as like traditional partners, I have three, like where it's kind of like
Yeah.
the romantic and sexual
Yeah.
kind of full package
Yeah.
partners, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then I have lots of more casual relationships or things that are like, going directions, things like that. And then that would be, yeah, like one, two, three,
Look at you.
somewhere around there. It kind of, people, it come in and out.
So, like, not even 2 years ago, you were still married?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you were obviously questioning your sexuality. You said that. Were you questioning your gender identity then too? Or that's
It
been a
was,
lifelong kind of thing?
yeah, it was again one of those moments where like I started just kind of like casually put it on my Instagram that I used she, they pronouns.
Yeah.
Like probably about 4 years ago. And for me, I just kind of was like, well, like I don't mind if people use they, so like I'll just put it here. It's fine.
Yeah.
And it was last summer then my it's hard to know what to call him, husband
Okay.
person.
Sure.
He was like, well, do you want people to use just they them pronouns for you? And I was like, well, I mean, like, yeah, in a dream world, but no one's ever going to do that. And he was
Mm,
like, well, they're not going to do that if you don't tell them.
yeah.
um, so it was only last year I was one of the like COVID queers that came out during COVID, where I was like, okay, here I
Is that a
am.
thing? A COVID
Oh,
queer?
totally. Yeah, there's
Oh
like
my
been a
god.
huge influx in people figuring out that they're trans or non-binary because they had a lot more time to kind of reflect on it and not have to like be out in public acting like somebody else. So,
It doesn't shock me that there's been like a queer COVID revolution and that you're
oh,
like,
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
have had so much time to think and there's so much like fuck it. Like I'm sick of this. Like there's been a job revolution, neurodivergent revolution, and why not a sexual identity revolution? All of that makes sense to me. It actually sounds like your ex-partner, even though like he was like, no, we can't be together and like we would divorce. He's like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. He is like he's supporting you, like which is
Hmm.
nice, and that he still is your friend, it sounds like.
And you know what? We only split up like a month ago. So we were
Yeah.
together for like a year and a half of open relationships, seeing other people,
Yeah.
going to therapy, things like that. So it yeah, it he grew a lot, and I mean, so did I.
Yeah.
But we both kind of learned a lot, and we're kind of like, hey, well, this isn't necessarily what is working
Yeah.
for us anymore, so
Yeah.
change it up.
Oh, good for you guys. Okay, polyamory. Like you were saying that people find that they can identify with it more when it's just a sex thing. Like you had mentioned that previously, that when you say no, it's actually about loving multiple people, then that's when people get kind of like pressed and they're like, what are you talking about? And I want to go over the terms so that people can understand what we're talking about, because a lot of this went right over my head. Consensual, I'm just going to say words. How's this? I'm just going to say
Sounds
words, you
good.
define it.
Okay.
Consensual non-monogamy.
Okay, that one is you started off right off the bat with a hot topic,
Okay.
because this is one where in theory, in the like general, like if you look up scholarly articles, things like that, you'll see consensual non-monogamy or ethical non-monogamy,
Right.
neither of which are terms that we actually use in the polyamorous community. It's kind of
Oh.
like the same idea as saying like consensual sex, right?
Oh,
If it's
okay.
not consensual,
Yeah.
it's not sex. So in the
Yeah.
same way that like if non-monogamy is not consensual, it's cheating. It's not polyamory, it's not non-monogamy. So that's where it's just kind of been that movement away from saying like,
Mm,
this is good non-monogamy, because it really
right.
like centers monogamy still as being inherently consensual, inherently ethical,
Yeah.
whereas this idea that you have to kind of justify non-monogamy. So anyways, that's just a little fun fact about the terms. We opted to use the like scholarly article terms
Yeah.
because there's not a lot of proof that, like that the community doesn't actually use it. So we're like,
Gotcha.
okay, we'll just stick with the kind of scholarly terms. But
Yeah.
basically what non-monogamy is talking about is any form of relationship with more than two people, like
Mm,
where there's kind of any differentiation, and it's not just those two people. Typically, we're talking romantic or sexual.
okay.
Platonic is kind of assumed that people have multiple friends.
So then what's the difference between polyamory and an open relationship?
So, polyamory would very specifically be the act or desire for loving multiple people. So,
Mhm.
it has to do with kind of committed romantic relationships and having multiple committed romantic relationships. Whereas an open relationship is typically used to refer to a couple where the couple is still very much kind of the focus, but they are open to having other sexual relationships outside of that one specific relationship.
Okay. Gotcha. I understand that. All right. Okay. Swinging. I know we talked about it already, but that's strictly sexual, correct?
Yeah. And a lot of the time, swingers are couples and then they'll kind of like do switching, or kind of be with multiple couples, but it still is often a focus on like going to a swinging party would often be something that a couple would go to together.
Some other terms were meta-amors. Metamors?
Yeah, that's a tricky one to say. Typically, people say metaamors,
Yeah.
and that would be your partner's partner. Or like,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so basically, it's kind of like I was gonna say romantic siblings, but that's not true at all.
Yeah.
But like your partner's partners, and different people have differing levels of relationships with them. Some are very close. Some like we'll go shopping together, like hang out, like
Yeah.
again, so many other terms like kitchen table polyamory would be where
Yeah.
the whole group is comfortable together and like will sit down at the kitchen table is kind of where the term comes
Uh,
from. Whereas other folks do what's called parallel polyamory, where
mm,
it's kind of like that's what I was describing before, where I'm kind of the center of the wheel and then I have spokes, is kind of how
yes.
I like it.
Yeah.
That would be called parallel polyamory, where those relationships are existing in a parallel but don't
Yeah.
necessarily cross over.
Yeah.
So there's these different kind of forms that exist as well.
Yeah. Um, a metamor, NRE. What's NRE?
NRE would be new relationship energy, and that's
Yeah.
kind of like the puppy love, like the very beginning of a relationship where you kind of are in that stage of like, this person can do no wrong. And
Ah.
like, I cannot wait for them to text me in the morning. And they're like that person where you see a text from them and you immediately respond, right?
Oh,
Like,
okay.
usually relationships get to a point where you're kind of like, I'll get to that later. But there's that beginning stage where you're like, I want to spend every second with you. As soon as
Yeah.
you respond, I'm going to respond. That kind of a thing would be the new relationship energy.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Um, this is the big one that when you guys did the presentation and we watched the TED Talk, I was like, they're just making stuff up now. Like they just made that word up. Compersion. And before we get into it, um, you were talking about, oh my God, I had a thought. You were talking about like how to bring up, not non-monogamy or polyamory with a partner. And I can love more than one person in the same way that I can love more than one child and I can love more than one sibling and all that stuff. Um, and the first way that people react to it, there was something you said that I wanted to grab, but I don't remember. But in any case, really, and I'm sure you're used to hearing it, is like, how do you deal with jealousy and how do you manage jealousy? And like, before you jump in, I think what really surprised me about your presentation was that you guys do not pretend that you're not jealous. Like, you're not like, we're impervious to it. It's quite the
Mhm.
opposite.
Yeah, so compersion, a lot of people kind of frame it as being the opposite of jealousy, but that's not necessarily the case. Really, what compersion is just the experience of happiness for somebody else's happiness.
Mhm.
And it's a word that like really is helpful to use even outside of non-monogamous relationships. But just this idea that like, for instance, one of my coworkers and I both applied for the same like kind of contract work
Mhm.
outside job, and I got it and he didn't, but he was like, "Oh my god, yeah you did, like you're going to kill it." That
Yeah.
would be compersion, where it's
Yeah.
like it may not have benefited me, but I'm happy that you're happy. I'm happy something good happened for you.
Yeah.
Whereas jealousy is often seen as I'm unhappy that something
Yeah.
good happened for you, which also isn't the case. That also reduces it down
Yeah.
inaccurately.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of things too, and like I could go into jealousy for hours.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, people feel jealous when their own needs aren't being met.
Yeah.
So, for instance, my girlfriend lives in Toronto, and I haven't even had the chance to meet her in person yet. I'm going to at the end of December, but we haven't been in person yet. And so she gets jealous if I'm going on dates with other partners, or like right now, I'm currently visiting two of my partners in BC, and she
Mhm.
was talking about that. She's jealous about that. And I was like,
Mhm.
okay, like, let's break it down because polyamory is new for her as well. And I was like, are you jealous because you don't want me to have it or because you want it for yourself? And she's like, well, it's because I want it for myself. Like, she's like, I want to take you out on nice dates. I want to be able to fall asleep next to you.
Mhm.
And so there's that difference as well in it not being like, I want to take this away from you, but like kind of a lack of needs being met, right? She has those
Right.
kind of romantic relationship needs as well, and they aren't being met because of our circumstances. And so
Mhm.
it's kind of like you can feel both compersion and jealousy at the same time.
Yeah.
But compersion, a lot of the time in the non monogamy kind of realm, would often be kind of seeing your partner with another partner, or like having them be like, oh my God, I just went on the best first date. Like they
Yeah.
were so easy to talk to. And you're like, oh my God, tell me about it. Like that sounds awesome. That would
Yeah.
be compersion, where it isn't like, like I'm losing them, they're slipping away, but like
Gotcha.
I'm excited for you.
Okay, how about this? What if you're so compersionist, you're such a comperser that or such a compersionist that your partner comes home and says, I had the best date, and you're like, that's amazing. Tell me all about him. And then they do, and you're like, I want him. How often does
Well,
that come
depends on
up?
your boundaries. It
Huh.
totally depends on your boundaries. For me, one of my boundaries that I have realized only recently is
Mhm.
that I don't necessarily want two people that I am in separate relationships with connecting with each other romantically or
Yeah.
sexually. But
Huh.
for some people, they love it. That's like, it brings them joy where it's like, I love these two people now, kind of like the now kiss. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah.
with your Barbies, like that's kind
Yeah.
of how they are too, right? Where they're like, I like both of you. So what if we, for
Yeah.
me, I don't
Yeah.
like it, but it totally is just talking about those boundaries
Tell me why
where
you
it
don't
might
like
be
it.
like, hmm,
Tell me why you don't like it though. Like, just personal preference? Is it a
I
power
would
thing?
say it is personal preference. I think it is also partially, I find it complicates relationships. Then
Mm.
instead of me feeling like I can go to this partner and be like, oh my God, like my other partner did this, and kind of having that like ability to vent. Now
Yeah.
you can't really do that because they're like, well, they probably like you don't really have, and you know what? Maybe it is toxic. Maybe this is like, a thing that I should work through.
Oh,
Hard
yeah.
to know.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I just like that separation, and I like a little bit of that feeling of like, it's me and you. Like, I
Yeah.
also have other people where it's me and me and
Yeah.
them, but like a little bit of that coziness of like, I know you, you know me. Um, but I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm still new to
Yeah.
this all too. I'm of the belief that more communication is always better. However, that said, it doesn't always work out that way. And a lot of the time, you're not aware of what your boundaries are until the situation comes up. So, like the partners that I'm visiting right now, the two of them are actually married. And I first started talking to one of them. And they were kind of like, oh, well, like, my husband is interested in being friends with you. Like, would you want to just kind of like chat with him? Just because, like, if you're going to be in my life, whatever, have a bit of communication. And I was like, sure. In that process, fell in love with their husband as well. So then it's like, okay,
And when
now,
you say, if I may interrupt, when you say fell in love with, you don't mean like colloquially, like, oh, I'm in love with this guy. Like you're in love with him.
yeah, yeah, like we're
Yeah.
in a committed relationship.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Okay.
and we like visit each other and yeah, like it's a fully developed relationship
Cool.
or whatever.
Sorry. I say I'm in love with people
So
all the time. So that's what I mean. Like I tend to just say that. So I wanted to be clear that you're like you love
I am
him.
romantically in love with both of
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Aw.
And so that was something that like I had never considered, but it just kind of happened.
Yeah.
And they were fine with it. We kind of, did like, okay, this works.
Yeah.
However, like it was about a month ago or so when two of my partners happened to meet on a dating app and like we're gonna go on a date. And then I found out about it and I was like, whoa, I had never set this boundary in place. But like,
Mm.
I am uncomfortable. I am like very viscerally, like, not okay with this.
Right.
Um, and so that was something again where it was like, I didn't realize this was a boundary for me until it came up. And I had
Yeah.
like a very intense response to it. And I'm like, okay, like, no, this isn't going to work for me.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, it sometimes is that way where you kind of have to have the learning experience first to figure out where your boundaries are.
There was something I saw that was like there's another term is like higher there's like a higher relationship hierarchy. And is there relationship anarchy too?
You bet there is.
Okay.
So I would consider myself a relationship anarchist,
Uh-huh.
just in the sense, for me, how that looks is that comes before even my polyamory. Like, it doesn't even fall under my polyamory. It's just kind of my thought process, my way of like looking at relationships, in that it kind of is like moving away from this idea of like blood is thicker than water, or
Mm,
like, your spouse has to come before everybody else, like that kind of an idea where it's like, just because you're my family member and we're related by blood does not mean that I owe you any more than anybody
right.
else. And my friends are just as important to me as my partners are. My family is just as important to me as my partners are. But there's not this idea that like romantic partner comes first and then family and then friends and then coworkers.
Right.
It's just like, you are important to me, maybe in different ways, but all
Mhm.
important to me.
Mhm.
Whereas
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
one.
I know. It's a mouthful.
It's an impossible word to say.
Hierarchical? Hierarchical? I don't know.
Hierarchical. Anyways,
Anyway.
hierarchical relationships a lot of the time have the couple that's often called the primary partnership
Uh-huh.
as the focus. So this would be, for instance, like monogamous relationships,
Yeah.
for the most part, operate off of a hierarchy. It's pretty
Right.
hard to be like, my friends matter just as much to me as my spouse
Right.
does,
Right.
when you have this idea that it's only you two in the world, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so there are some folks who are um, polyamorous, have open relationships, whatever it may be, that also have a hierarchical relationship, in that they maybe have that primary partnership and things branch off of that, or like that might be where they're swingers or things like that.
Yeah.
And it's less so of an even playing field so much as
Mhm.
it's, we are a couple first and foremost, but we
Yeah.
see other people as well, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh my god, I'm just thinking about like loving multiple people, and when you like when you talk about friendship, and that like comes up so much. I watched a bunch of TED talks about polyamory too, and they say like you can have multiple friends, and like if you made a new friend, how would people feel? And like I know that there's it's not exactly the same thing, but that and I even put it in my reflection paper like for school that I was like when it was posed to me that way, I actually have been in love with multiple people at one point. I have had a romantic partner and I've also had like close best friends, particularly like I've had like so many different best friends in my life, but I can remember like also being in love with my best friend too. Like it was just beyond a friendship and it wasn't romantic, and I guess I should be clear, but I loved her. I love my friends. Um But now when I think of it that way, I would like be jealous sometimes when my like best friend would make a new friend. So like I'm not a great compersionist. I'm not a good compervert. I made a new word.
I love it. I
Can
love
I
it.
add it to the glossary?
Yeah,
Oh my
totally.
god.